video, I'm going to talk to you about how to make a poster so that it looks good. So in addition to your actual poster that you're going to be working on and the markers you're going to use, you also want a ruler, and if it's available, a yardstick is also really helpful, a pencil, and I recommend that you have one that the point is really sharp, or use a mechanical pencil. It's going to work better for you. And then I also recommend some scratch paper so that you can plan out what you want to do. I'm going to make a poster about a book. And I start with my scratch paper. I know obviously I want to include the title. This one's For the Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and that will be at the top of my poster. And then I want to think about, what am I going to have down here? What's my design? What other words do I want? What sort of a caption do I want? And I'm going to plan that out before I start actually drawing it on the poster paper. One thing to think about when you are making a poster is that it's meant to be hung on a wall, so your writing should be big. A good poster does not have paragraphs. The letters are not teeny tiny. They're big enough that people can see it from a little bit of a distance. Okay, so I've got my design planned out. I'm going to show the scene where Tom and Huck and Joe are on Jackson's Island and they're camping out and no one knows they're there. A step that's really important when you make a poster that should not be skipped is to take time to measure it. You want your words to look good. You want the lines to be straight. So the way to do that, start with your ruler and put it at the top. And I want the beginning of the title, The Adventures, I want that about 2 inches down. And I want those letters to be about 1 inch tall. And then Tom Sawyer is the important part. I want those to be 2 inches tall, and then by Mark Twain, 1 inch. So what I've done on the paper is I've made it just a light mark at 2 inches, 3 inches, 5 inches, and 6 inches. And on the other side of the paper, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Drawing straight lines is really tough. I am not good at it. I can't do it freehand, so I need to use this to help me out. So I've got my lines there, and they're just very, very small and very light because I don't want them to show up. I'm actually going to erase them later. But next I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line it up. Having the marks measured on both sides makes sure that I get my lines even, and then with my pencil I'm going to hold it by the end so I'm not holding it very tightly, and just make a line all the way across. And I'm going to do that the same way for each of these lines where I'm going to have rows of letters. So you can see now I've got my lines there, and I've got a straight place to start my writing. Before I write though, I want my letters to look good. I want them to be even. And so here's a trick for that. So I'm going to start with Tom Sawyer, and I'm going to count how many letters are in it, including the space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'll do that same thing for each of the other lines. Okay, so I've counted out all my words. The top line, The Adventures of, is 17 letters, including the spaces. Tom Sawyer, including the space, is 10. And by Mark Twain, including the spaces, is 13. So the next thing I want to do is figure out what is in the middle. So if I divide these in half, I find out what my middle letter is. So in The Adventures of, in is the middle letter. There's 8 on each side. Tom Sawyer is 10 letters, so I'm going to draw a line between the S and the A, so there's 5 on each side. And then by Mark Twain is 13, so I need 6 on each side, so K is my middle letter. Those middle letters are important because that's where I'm going to start lettering to make sure that I get my lettering even. Okay, I'm going to go back to my ruler and find the middle space. So my paper is about 12 inches wide, so right about 6 is the middle. I'm just going to make a really light line there. And then I'll start my lettering. So I'm going to start with the letter in the middle, and that will go at that middle spot. So for The Adventures of, it is the letter N. I'm going to center it over the spot, and then I'm going to finish the word. Okay, so now I've got half of Adventures. The next thing I'm going to do is a little bit tricky. I'm going to write the rest of The Adventures, and I'm going to write it backwards. So from in, and this is why you want to have your words written out so you can look back at them. Okay, so now I've got my first line done, The Adventures of, and it's not completely perfect, but it's pretty well centered. If I had started just at the edge of the paper and tried to center it without measuring and without counting my letters, it definitely would have not ended up in the middle. So that is a trick that will help you out. Okay, I used that same pattern to make the rest of my title, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and that is pretty well centered on my paper. Move the camera so you can see the centering a little bit better. Then I've got the bottom half of my paper to make the rest of the poster. Before I do that though, I'm going to take a minute and erase these lines. You can use the end of your pencil eraser, that works fine, but if you have a larger eraser, this would be a good place to use that. Okay, now I've got all my lines erased. The next thing I want to think about on my poster is the rest of my design. So I already started that. I've got the guys fishing. They've got their raft on the river. And then I have to decide, do I want any other words down here? Do I want a caption? Do I want a caption maybe here? Do I want the guys to have speech bubbles? So I want to think about all those things before I start making them on my actual poster. And I want to remember, letters should be big. Don't put anything on your poster that's less than a ½ inch. Okay, so I figured out everything that I want on my design, and then you can decide what sort of medium you want to use. If it's a great big poster on poster board, maybe it's paint or paint markers. Maybe it's just regular markers. This is a smaller poster, and also I'm not super confident with my drawing skills, so I'm going for the colored pencils because I can erase them if I need to. And I'm going to start by making kind of my guidelines. So I know I want the river to be there. It's going to be kind of curvy like the riverbank would be. And I know I want some bushes and shrubs and things in the background. So I'm just going to kind of draw a squiggly line where those will be. And I'll come in later and make that look better, but that is just going to give me an idea. My main focus is going to be here in between with Tom and Huck and Joe and the raft. But I've got my poster laid out, and this is going to end up making a better looking poster that looks more professional, and I'm going to be proud to have that hanging on the wall.